Stanley and Sandra continued to see each other over the next few weeks. Stanley worked hard to maintain his wealthy facade, while Sandra remained convinced that she had found the rich husband she always dreamed of. But as the relationship deepened, it became harder for Stanley to keep up the act. One weekend, Sandra invited Stanley to a high society event hosted by her parents. Stanley knew he had to attend, but he was terrified that someone might expose him. He borrowed an expensive suit from a friend and practiced his line, hoping to impress Sandra's parents. When he arrived at the event, Stanley felt out of place among the real wealthy guests. He stuck close to Sandra, who proudly introduced him to her parents. Mr. and Mrs. Okafor were polite but curious. They asked Stanley many questions about his business. Stanley tried his best to answer, but his nerve betrayed him. He mixed up his stories and gave vacuum responses, which raised Mr. Okafor suspicious. Mr. Okafor decided to dig deeper and asked Stanley to visit his office the next day. The next morning, Stanley arrived at Mr. Okafor's office, feeling like he was walking into a trap. Mr. Okafor greeted him warmly, but quickly got down to business. Stanley, I did some research on your companies. I couldn't find any record of them. Can you explain that? Stanley's heart pounded. He knew he was caught. Mr. Okafor, I need to confess something. I am not who I said I was. I am not a wealthy businessman. I work as a clerk in a small office. I pretended to be rich because I wanted people to respect me and I wanted to impress Sandra. Mr. Okafor listened quietly. Stanley, I appreciate your honesty, but you must understand that lying is not a foundation for a strong relationship. I am going to give you a chance to prove yourself. Come work at my company, learn the business, and show me that you can be responsible and honest. Stanley was shocked and relieved. He agreed to Mr. Okafor's offer, determined to turn his life around. Meanwhile, Sandra was growing suspicious of Stanley. She noticed he was becoming more nervous and secretive. One evening, she decided to follow him. To her surprise, she saw him getting off a bus and entering a small shabby apartment. Sandra felt betrayed and confronted Stanley the next day. Stanley, I saw where you live. You have been lying to me all this time. You are not rich, are you? Stanley took a deep breath. Sandra, you are right. I am not rich. I pretended to be because I thought that is what you wanted. But I care about you and I want to make things right. Your father has given me a job at his company and I'm going to work hard to prove myself. Sandra was furious. You lied to me, Stanley. I thought you were my ticket to an easy life. How can I trust you now? Stanley looked at Sandra with sadness. Sandra, you need to understand that real happiness does not come from money. It is about being honest, working hard, and building a life together. I am willing to change and be a better person, but you need to ask yourself if you are willing to do the same. Sandra was conflicted. She realized that her dream of marrying a rich man was just a dream. She had relied on her parents' wealth all her life and never thought about working hard or being independent. Over the next few weeks, Sandra watched Stanley as he worked diligently at her father's company. She saw his determination to change and prove himself. Gradually, her anger softened and she began to respect him. One day, Mr. Okafor called Sandra into his office. Sandra, I have seen a change in Stanley. He is working hard and learning fast. But what about you? When will you start taking responsibility for your life? Sandra felt ashamed. Daddy, I realize now that I was wrong. I have been lazy and spoiled. I want to change too. Can I start learning about the business? Mr. Okafor smiled. Of course, my dear. It is never too late to start. Sandra began working at her father's company just like Stanley. She found that she enjoyed the work and felt proud of her accomplishments. Over time, she and Stanley rebuilt their relationship on a foundation of honesty and hard work. In the end, Sandra and Stanley both learn important lessons. Stanley discovered that respect and admiration come from being honest and hardworking, not from pretending to be something he is not. Sandra learned that real happiness comes from taking responsibility for her own life and working towards her goals. The moral of this story is that true wealth comes from within, and a life built on lies will eventually crumble. Honesty, hard work, and self-respect are the keys to a fulfilling and meaningful life. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to give it a like, follow this channel for more story, share and comment. See you in our next post.